A very good evening to all. International Council for Circular Economy welcomes you to the fourth season of our Circular Chat. We are extremely excited to be back with another season of interactions with experts around us, and especially as we discuss a topic which has been doing rounds in the industry for quite some time now, and it definitely has a huge scope in future. So we are talking about environmental, social, and governance ESG criteria. ESG investing is likely to influence more and more companies to implement strategies to reduce their carbon footprint and be responsible for their social and governance impacts. The Circular Chat is an initiative by ICCE to develop and promote the idea of a circular economy and its related topics. The chats engage key actors to mobilize system solutions at scale. Season 4 shall be discussing ESG in detail over 14 episodes with experts joining us from the domain. In this episode, we'll be talking about the standards and frameworks in ESG. My name is Surbhi, and I'm happy to host our guest speaker today, Mr. Chinmay Chhatbar. Chinmay has over 15 years of experience across developmental programs, research, governance, policy, engineering, and management. He worked as a lead consultant at Social Impact Assessment Cell at Tata Institute of Social Sciences and senior consultant with Government of Gujarat. He has also worked in energy and transportation policy research with various national and international stakeholders. His keen interest in knowledge markets led him to initiate We Governance, an organization which works to strengthen the governance knowledge network by providing research, execution, and networking support based on the knowledge economy principles. They are in transition to organize intellectual capital and knowledge ecosystems to solve problems, create both intellectual and material wealth, and contribute to the happiness and well-being of the people. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Chinmay. Let's get started with our discussion.
Hi,
So,
Surbi. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here having this conversation with you.
that's great, Chinmay. That's great. We love to have you here. And so we have a round of questions for you waiting. So we are
Yes.
starting first with the first question, which is I will ask you about, as I see that you are into research and consulting on regulations, policies, governance, and impact. So help us understand why ESG? Why?
So every business operates in a specific context with risk, opportunities, relationship networks, and time period. Thus, every business is either impacted by others or impacting others. ESG is a global movement to recognize this and reorganize stakeholders to assess and deal with all such impacts to ensure that the wealth is created for shareholders without compromising people and planet's well-being. So it's also an effort to address information deficits on all such aspects under ESG pillars. And if you see, there are two types of actions required by businesses. First is the
Hmm.
essential actions, which are mandated by regulatory requirements, business as usual requirements, shareholder requirements, corporate governance requirements. And then there are leadership actions to develop a robust competitive strategy to take the business sustainability to the next level, a level which will be difficult to achieve by the competitors. See, forward-looking companies do not ignore these trade-offs when approaching ESG. They know the unique business models and they are clear about benefits and costs, including the opportunity cost of not addressing these externalities on ESG dimensions. That's why ESG.
That's right, absolutely right. So, we all understand what is the importance of ESG in today's scenario, and definitely ESG is going to make a positive impact on the society at large. So, do you think it can be profitable for businesses? What is the relevance of ESG in business performance, actually?
If you look at ESG discourse, which is frameworks, standards, assurance, and rating mechanisms, all of them together is a global knowledge pool on critical matters related to capital, risk, and people management. So by just going through the process of ESG reporting, you can directly borrow from this global knowledge pool. So ESG thus offers two distinct sets of advantages. First, comes with ESG being a self-assessment tool. It helps for consistent and comparable reporting across peers, sectors, regions, etc. It improves transparency, risk management, and performance management within the organization. It standardizes the data architecture and thus gives both a bird eye view for the top down approach by the leadership and also the specific details, granularity for bottom up approach by the rest of the organization. And there is a second set of advantages which come with having ESG strategy, policy, reporting in place. Say it can improve the reputation, brand value, which is one of the major drivers of access to global capital, especially capital funds which are sensitive to sustainability. Second, it can also ensure your bottom line by de-risking your operations, your products, data governance mechanisms, by increasing your resource efficiency, energy efficiency, productivity, and thus cost savings. It can also lift your top line by increased access to markets and customers. If you are able to take the advantage of climate-related transitions happening across technologies, policies, and consumer preferences. And it also makes you better prepared for compliance and regulatory requirements, which is one of the essential parts. Thus, ESG gives many advantages: access to funds, ensuring bottom line, improving top line, streamlining the business strategies and processes, and being compliant. All of these are critical drivers of business performance. So there is a strong link between ESG reporting and business performance.
Right, right. You are absolutely right. So it is making all sense why ESG and how it is relevant in the business performance. It's making sense to us now. So as we all know that SEBI has made it a mandate for the top 1,000 companies in India to produce their BRSR report in financial year 2023. Now, tell us what are key elements which are to be considered for ESG reporting.
Okay, let me talk about the key elements of ESG recognized globally, and then I can also mention about the specific requirement given in SEBI's framework. So, although ESG publications across the world mention four key elements uh, as four elements as key elements of ESG, which are impacts, stakeholders, materiality, and due diligence. But I believe that there are two more elements to be inserted in that list, which are leadership commitment and research and evidence-based, reasonably accurate assessments. So when we talk about leadership commitment, it should be visible in the business purpose, strategy, and governance policies. Without that, it is difficult to get entire organization and outside stakeholders convinced and achieve the desired financial and sustainable goals. Impacts include impacts on economy, environment, and people. People could be an individual or collective or a group of people. Impacts could be actual or potential, negative or positive, direct or indirect, short term or long term, reversible or irreversible. Stakeholders include both kinds, affected and potentially affected stakeholders. Common categories are shareholders, investors, suppliers, consumers, employees, governments, local communities, vulnerable groups, etc. We have to be careful here. Human rights have a particular status in ESG. So the impacts on human rights are considered the critical impacts. Materiality refers to the topics which represent most significant impacts of the organization. And consequences of these impacts could be operational or reputational, and thus, in turn, financial in some cases. And that's how they are related to long-term success and valuation of the organization. If you look at standard setting and rating agencies' methods for risk assessment, there are issues related to data, uncertainties, biases, granularities, scenario building exercises, which limit the accuracy of these assessments. But we know that each case is a unique business case, and so it is important to carefully deploy qualitative and quantitative methods for reasonably accurate assessments. And due diligence is the process through which the organization identifies, prevents, and remedies, mitigates, addresses actual and potential negative impacts. Prioritization can be done based on the organization's relationship with negative impacts, whether they are direct or indirect, the severity of impact, likelihood of impact. Ideally, the organization should thrive to avoid causing or contributing to negative impacts. But in case if they occur, they should also cooperate and provide for remedial actions through legitimate processes. Now, getting going back to the question initial part, which was on SEBI's BRSR requirements, which is business responsibility and sustainability reporting. So, if your organization wants, and it could be a very good starting point for the first time reporting companies, that if your organization wants to align with local regulatory requirements, say in this case it's SEBI and mandated this requirement for 1,000 largest listed companies. So it is good to start with that. SEBI's BRSR is based on NGRBC, which is National Guidelines for Responsible Business Conduct, which is published by Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India. And it is also based on SDGs and other international frameworks. So it borrows a lot of principles and indicators from those frameworks and standards. There are 9 thematic pillars, principles in the framework, starting with governance, sustainable and safe goods and services, well-being of employees, being responsive to stakeholders, human rights, protect and restore the environment, responsible and transparent public and regulatory policy influence, which is related to lobbying, then inclusive growth and equitable development, and last is provide value to customers in a responsible manner. The framework also mentions about 4 key enablers, which are again leadership commitment, stakeholder engagement, employee engagement, and disclosure and reporting. There are specific metrics provided for each of these principles. Every principle is carrying an list of essential indicators and a list of leadership indicators. One of the most salient features of this framework is that they have been able to provide mapping of uh, applicable laws and regulations in the country with each principle and disclosure requirements. Yes, Surbi.
Right, right. Absolutely. So, as you rightly mentioned, what are the key elements that we have to keep in mind while we are working on these ESG reports? So, I understand generating these ESG reports requires alignment with internationally recognized sustainability frameworks. So, what frameworks are available for ESG?
See, frameworks provide guidance on principles, topics, relevant material topics, assessments, actions, metrics of targets, indicators. So if you are trying to find out the broadest of them, it is SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, based on the 2030 agenda, which has 17 major goals, 169 targets, and 230 indicators for the challenges like poverty, inequality, labor rights, human rights, climate, prosperity, institutions, and partnership, etc. And it will be useful for the organization to communicate their sustainability commitments in the future, in the long term and medium term. But if you want to align with the local reporting requirement, which should be the starting point, as I mentioned, it should be in India, SEBI's BRSR. There is also another framework by UN's Global Compact, which has 10 principles across 4 categories: human rights, environment, labor, and anti-corruption. There are UNGPs, United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which talk about the framework for protect, respect, and remedy. There's also another important framework which is related to climate-related financial disclosures, TCFD, Task Force on Climate-related Financial Disclosures, which provides support to investors, lenders, and insurance providers in assessing and pricing climate-related risks. So basically, what it does is it identifies the concentration of carbon-related assets in the financial system. Thus, it provides the overall assessment of exposure of financial system to climate-related risk. It has 4 pillars: governance, strategy, risk management, metrics, and targets. It is mandatory for signatories of UN principles for responsible investment to be aligned and refer the TCFD framework while reporting for ESG. There's also recently published Measuring Stakeholder Capitalism by World Economic Forum's International Business Council, which has 21 core and 34 expanded metrics across four broad categories: principles of governance, planet, people, and prosperity. And there are also frameworks which are useful for specific elements of ESG. For example, the OECD's due diligence guidance for responsible business conduct, IFC's performance standards, ILO's fundamental rights at work, ADB's social and environmental safeguards. There's also a new entry expected in EU by EFRAG, European Financial Reporting Advisor Group, which is just, I think, published draft uh, standards, ESRS, European Sustainability Reporting Standards.
Right.
And the salient feature is double materiality, which considers basically both financial and sustainability related disclosures. Yes.
Right, right. So I see that it's an extensive research that goes into, reporting these standards and adhering to these frameworks. So there are standards also that we need to adhere to. You have talked about the frameworks that we need to take care, and there are standards also that we have to see. So what are these standards actually?
So standards derive their uh, principles, of course, from the frameworks, global frameworks. But standards are also more compact, more precise in identifying the issues and indicators, metrics for the relevant activities, etc. So the most widely used standard right now is, of course, GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, which is developed by Global Sustainability Standards Board. It has been there for 25 years now, and it is the most comprehensive standards because it covers all types of materialities. KPMG produced
Right.
a survey in December 2020, which mentioned that 96%, which means almost all of the world's largest companies, report their sustainability progress. And out of that, 73% rely on GRI framework. Then there are SASB, developed by Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which provide guidance for financially material sustainability disclosures. They have a much better granularity, which means specific details, metrics, and indicators, and also have industry-specific modules, which thus become their salient features. And that's also the reason for their increasing adoption and popularity by companies across the world. For example, BlackRock has endorsed SASB alignment for their ESG reporting for all its portfolio companies since 2020. There is one more CDP, Carbon Disclosure Project, which provides guidance for environmental impacts, mainly collecting data and managing performance for GHG emissions, water resources, forest, biodiversity, etc. There are, as I mentioned, there is new standards coming in Europe, which is European Sustainability Reporting Standards, which highlights double materiality. Then for benchmarking purposes, you can also look up for Dow Jones Sustainability Index. And there are also some of the ESG rating methods adopted by various agencies. Let's say, for example, MSCI, which can provide practical and effective guidance for ESG reporting. So companies can also refer to those approaches. Just so.
Right, right. So absolutely, you are given us an overview of the standards and frameworks, but I'm sure there is a lot more there to understand these standards and frameworks. And somebody who's doing actually the working on these, it's an extensive, learning, and the knowledge has to be up to the standards and frameworks of uh, these. So now that we know about standards and frameworks, now would you try to explain how actually to integrate these frameworks and standards into organizations' business strategies and processes?
Yeah. So standards and frameworks provide guidance on relevant topics, metrics, and indicators already mentioned. We should always begin by asking why. Why report? Who is it for? What does it bring for us? So internally, leadership management has to discuss the value that reporting can bring to the company, the audience for which reporting and communication is being done, and the commitment and resources required to undertake the entire task. So I believe that as a starting point, companies should look at the local reporting requirements. For example, for Indian businesses, as of now, it is BRSR by SEBI and NGRBC, which for the non-listed companies. It is good to start small, focusing on what's most material to your company and collecting quality data to meet those mandatory requirements. As the organization's understanding of sustainability matures, later on, more resources can also be dedicated to align with the international frameworks such as GRI, CDP, TCFD. Uh, but the next important step in doing this will be to conduct the stakeholder consultation rounds because they will give
Right.
you the immense insights on impacts and possible areas of solutions. And then you need to define goals, strategies, policies, metrics, indicators, processes to address these impacts. Here you can deploy problem solving frameworks such as SWOT analysis, design thinking, mind mapping, system dynamic modeling, theory of change models, cost benefit analysis, social returns, etc. to assess these options and arrive at the implementable options. Once you have that list of implementable options with your own conclusions and reasoning, you can devise strategies across the company's value chain to implement those options as plans. Once you implement them, you can measure impacts and progress periodically, then report the progress and engage again with the stakeholders for continuous improvement. This is how you create a continuous cycle of ESG progress, by incorporating them into your business processes and strategies.
Right, right, right. Absolutely, absolutely, Chinmay. So you have told us about how exactly we can integrate these standards and frameworks into the organization's business strategies. Now, what will be your advice? You have given a lot of advice already. I know that, but again, what is your advice for using ESG framework standards? So all the points that you have mentioned already, we definitely consider them, but then now a specific thing, if you would want to mention about using ESG framework standards to companies.
Yeah. So with so many frameworks, we know that it is difficult to decide which ones are right for
Hmm.
your organization. So don't get overwhelmed with the abundance and complexity of standards, frameworks, and compliance requirements. Because if you see, with every additional layer of information about your firm gets separated from others and eventually becomes your own unique case. And thus it requires understanding on risk and opportunities unique to your business and context. So be advised, be informed, be assured, but don't rely too much on third parties and rating agencies only. We have to appreciate the fact that all frameworks have limitations and thus develop your own structure and decision framework for ESG reporting. Rely more on internal extensive research, identify technologies which can help you conduct those research and data collection, improve the outcomes and conclusions and thus decision frameworks, address the biases and uncertainties in the frameworks. It's about improving both ultimately bottom line and top line, bottom line and top line for your business along with the sustainability. So stay on top of the discourse and believe in your organization's abilities to observe, judge, and act. All the best with your ESG journey. And if you need any help or assistance, please reach out. We'll be more than happy to assist. Thank you.
Thank you, Chinmay. So we understand now every organization is unique and their requirements and how they can, imply with all the standards and frameworks what is best suited for them. They have to go accordingly. They have to consult. They have to take consideration of the stakeholders also. So this is a very enriching experience with you, Chinmay, and we really thank you for being here with us. And I would also like to thank everyone who decided to join our live session today. And I hope we have been able to disseminate some useful information through our episode. Once again, I would like to thank you all for joining us. We'll be back at the same time next week. And if you don't want to miss out on any updates for future conversations, do follow our social media pages and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.